Okay, I think Alvin can start the presentation.
Can I?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and greetings from Jakarta. I'm Swanto, Technical Officer at Power Fossil Fuel Alternative Energy and Storage. First of all, on behalf of ASEAN Center for Energy, we would like to welcome you to our 11th edition of ARNECC Paper Talks today, or actually, this is the first in 2022. And this edition of ARNECC Paper Talks going to discuss a journal paper entitled Techno-enviro-economic analysis of hydrogen supply chain with ASEAN case study, and it is published at International Journal of Hydrogen Energy, volume 46 in September 2021. We recently recapped the energy trends in ASEAN. In particular, we found that the topic of hydrogen gained significant attention last year. So I think it's a better idea to start the ARNECC Paper Talks on 2022. And we believe that this publication is important to share to ASEAN audience and enriching the discussion in regional level. And we are very excited to have Professor Iftekhar A Karimi, or Professor Karimi, the main author of this paper, to share his finding, and also Dr. Jenny Rizkiana to give his comment as well, or thought or any perspective. And we would like also to invite you all to join the discussion. So before we listen the presentation from Professor Karimi, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have Professor Karimi. He received his Bachelor of Technology in Chemical Engineering from IIT Bombay and PhD from Purdue University. He's a leading expert in the area of process system engineering and optimization with a unique a blend of experience from academia and industry. He has worked on several practical issues related to optimization of chemical, biological, and environmental systems, and led many industry collaborative research projects. And he led Singapore first roadmap on CCSU, leading focus group of activities on natural gas at in US, and is also working on hydrogen supply chain for ASEAN region. His current research interests include process modeling, simulation and optimization, energy system, energy integration, system biology, carbon capture and utilization and storage, decarbonization, hydrogen and natural gas. And we also have Dr. Jenny. Dr. Jenny received his bachelor and master degree from Department of Chemical Engineering at Institute Teknologi Bandung, or Bandung Institute of Technology in Indonesia. He received his Doctor of Engineering in 2016 from Safety System Engineering, Graduate School of Engineering, Hirosaki University, Japan. His research interests are thermocatalytic conversion, biomass processing and biorefinery, and zeolite catalysis. He is a certified professional engineer registered in Institute of Engineers Indonesia and member of technical committee 2710 solid and gas bioenergy and the National Standardization Board of Indonesia and Indonesian Bioenergy Expert Association. And his research publication focused on bioenergy, power generation, photocatalytic water splitting, coal gasification, methanol dehydration, hydrocarbon gas dispersion and explosion. So we are very excited to learn more about hydrogen technology from Professor Karimi and also Dr. Jenny. So we are going to start to hear the presentation from Professor Karimi. I would like to remind all the participants, if you have any questions, you may use the chat box to write the question or just simply jump into the Q&A session. And I think without any further ado, Professor Karimi, the time is yours to present your paper.
Thank you, Dr. Suwanto. Let me share. Okay, I hope you can see this now. Sorry. All right, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, and hopefully we can hear me as well. Right. So, Assalamu alaikum. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me here. Since the time is limited, and obviously there is a lot of things to discuss, and the subject is very wide. So I'm going to basically focus on a few key points rather than go into more details. Okay, hopefully during the question answer we can go into them details. So this basically study was inspired, a couple of years ago when Singapore really started looking at hydrogen as a seriously as a source of green energy to reduce the carbon emissions. Okay, and Exxon Mobil is the one who supported our project. So we have a number of. This is not something that I'm just doing on my own. I have a team of people who is doing this. So we have academic collaborators from Prof Farooq, who is a separations expert in our department. Prof Wang, who was with NUS, now she has moved to Tsinghua University. From ExxonMobil Research and Engineering, we have 3 experts, Dr. Adam Musadi, Dr. Chapman, and Dr. Rob Johnson. Number of research fellows and assistants have been involved, associates have been involved in this project. Dr. Nicholas Hang, who is now in China on a faculty position, he did most of this work, and Dr. Vaishali, Dr. Thaure also participated in that, and Dr. Garud and Mr. Sang are right now working on this project. So this is an ongoing project. Right? The paper that we are going to discuss is the first paper that we published, and the project was supported by Singapore Energy Center under the umbrella of Singapore Energy Center solely by ExxonMobil Corporation. So we all know about CO2, right? I mean, we all know it's all increasing. Whether you want to call it is skyrocketing or plane rocketing, it's just words that count. But the debate on global warming will rage on. But obviously, we don't want to end up here, right? So we need really an urgent best strategy for the CO2 challenge. Energy conservation has been used for a number of decades now. Energy efficiency has been the focus for many countries, including Singapore, and it has yielded its dividends. But we all know that it has theoretical and practical limits. So we need to really go beyond. And what is that beyond is basically our renewable energy, right? So renewable energy is our ultimate savior. Now, but we know that from our high carbon present, moving to no carbon future is not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick, right? It's not going to happen overnight. So deep decarbonization requires a strategy, and that is going to be a transitional strategy, which is going to involve natural gas for sure. Okay, this is what experts estimate all around the globe, that natural gas is going to be a key transition fuel while we are going from high carbon to no carbon. So obviously, there is no way out for us to address carbon for the next few decades of our transition. So everything related to carbon, which is capture, sequestration, utilization, all of these topics are going to be important for at least several decades to come. So what we are really looking for is really nexus of carbon and renewable energy. So what we want to do is we want to have carbon capture and sequestration, carbon dioxide utilization, and renewable and green energy. We want to see what is the optimum mix of these three technologies that's going to deliver the benefits for us. Okay, so but there are obviously lots of challenges, and I know you guys are in the center. A lot of you have studied this subject, so you all know what the challenges are. First of all, variety is a challenge. You can call it as a blessing, because having multiple ways of producing renewable energy is a good thing for us, right? We can then choose and select and mix. So the problem is, the issue is, what is the best mix, right? And because of the nexus that I just described to you, we need to consider how do conventional sources interplay with the renewable sources. So that's the key question we need to address. Producing renewable energy is not cost competitive completely right now. So techno-economic feasibility is a big challenge, right? How do you produce it efficiently? How do you produce it economically? And intermittency is a challenge that plagues renewable energy, and that poses several problems for us. Okay, local supply and demand imbalance. We are living in an imperfect world. I mean, this is a problem that we have faced for centuries, right? No matter whether we're talking about oil supply, food supply, labor supply, skill supply, there is always an imbalance, right? So you got to have interplay of resources across the globe. So transporting renewable energy regionally as well as globally is obviously an important challenge, and that's why we need to develop energy supply chains. So hydrogen and hydrogen economy received much attention back like about 10-15 years ago, when Bush was the president, and there were some talks in AICHE where there was a panel of experts who looked at hydrogen economy. But then somehow that subject didn't really took speed. But now in the last several years, because of the urgent attention that the carbon emissions need to receive, this has been taken up. So there have been roadmaps developed by several countries, right? Studies developed by several national agencies. But we couldn't really find a comprehensive study on ASEAN. So we thought that that was something, and that was also the interest that ExxonMobil was looking at. They wanted to look at how a ASEAN region will develop. So that's why we focused on ASEAN. If you want to use hydrogen, obviously there are challenges, right? You have several production pathways again, so you need to decide where to produce and what to produce and what method to use. So there are conventional pathways, and then there is this electrolysis, right? Solar electrolysis. The biggest challenge is the logistics of hydrogen, right? It is the lightest gas in nature, so storage is difficult, transport is difficult. The densities that we're talking about very low, whether you talk about energy density or physical density. At room temperature pressure, they are very low, right? So you need a lot of volume. Compression, if you want to avoid that, you need to compress or you need to liquefy, and both of them require energy. So if you, for example, compare the density of diesel, energy density of diesel with respect to compressed hydrogen, it's only 1/10, right? Energy, even if you take liquid hydrogen, 1/5 of diesel, right? So you can see that there is a huge difference in the energy density. And whenever we talk about extreme pressures and temperatures, there are obvious safety challenges involved as far as the process is concerned. So there has been much interest on alternate hydrogen carriers to transport hydrogen in form of energy. So there are what are known as liquid organic hydrogen carriers, which are called LOHCs. So benzene cyclohexane, for example, is one example. Toluene methyl cyclohexane is a very widely known option for as an LOHC. And then there are other methods which are basically methanol, ammonia, and metal hydrides, etc. So what our objective for the study was to study hydrogen supply chains and their planning in a quantitative manner. So we wanted to use models and optimization to see how the supply chains will evolve in Singapore and ASEAN in general, and Singapore in particular. And so what we have developed over the years, the last several years, is that we have developed a tool, which is a user-friendly tool, interactive tool, which we have called HARD, which will allow decision makers to study various scenarios and perform various types of analysis and develop roadmaps. Okay, so some of the questions that we wanted to answer are, if you want to develop hydrogen, let's say in ASEAN by 2050, okay, what's going to happen? Where should we produce hydrogen, how much, when, what method, etc. Should a country import hydrogen? Should it produce locally? What's the percentage of local production versus import production? Things like that. What's the best hydrogen carrier? What's the cost of delivering? Right? That's a question which most decision makers want to ask. Is it going to be economical? What is it going to cost me to get hydrogen to my shore? Right? And what is the impact on carbon? Which is, because after all, deep carbonization is the ultimate goal that we are trying to pursue. So we envision, let me see if I can get rid of this guy, right? Okay. So we envision a supply chain, right? We thought of it, as I said, right? You have to combine carbon, you have to combine natural gas, and we have to combine hydrogen. So as you can see here, there are three supply chains which are important. NG, LNG supply chain, CO2 supply chain, because looking at the geography of ASEAN, you will have to transport CO2 for sequestration, etc., to regional countries, etc., things like that. So that's going to be important. And then you have H2 supply chain, and then you have all kinds of options. Power generation with carbon capture, power generation with or hydrogen production with carbon capture, hydrogen production via electrolysis, use of hydrogen in transport, use of hydrogen in industry and domestic, and use of hydrogen in various segments of transport. So the questions is that how do we achieve this low carbon or zero carbon ASEAN or Singapore? So this tool basically is hydrogen economy assessment and resource tool, which we have called HEART, as I said, has three components, right? It's able to optimize and configure supply chains. So it allows the ability to configure supply chains, allocate production sites, allocate terminal sites, and things like that. And you have various topics that you can address. I'm not going to go into details of this, right? But the configuration options in HEART are, you allow about 9 different ways of producing hydrogen. So we have the economics of all of these things inside HEART. So we can select a method, and then it will be able to estimate the cost of producing hydrogen. Then we say, okay, you're going to produce hydrogen at 20 bar. It's going to be supplied by pipeline, and then it goes to export terminal. From export terminal, it goes to import terminal. Then you have a number of ways of transporting that hydrogen. So it could be by liquid hydrogen, it could be by methyl cyclohexane, it could be as liquid ammonia, it could be as a methanol, right? So these are our hydrogen carriers and transport options. Then you can transport it by trucks, and this would be also you could transport it by pipeline. So we allow these options, especially here, right? If you are considering export and import terminals which are on land, then you can now have options like pipeline and truck, right? And then the products that we are interested in are, for example, 20 bar hydrogen, which would be used for power sector or industry sector, and then 700 bar hydrogen, which would be used for your transport sector as a fuel cell vehicle. And you can also use directly ammonia as a source of hydrogen. So rather than cracking ammonia to get hydrogen, you just use ammonia as a direct fuel in power generation or other applications. So this basically gives you the options of configuration in hydrogen, in HEART. So now I'm going to just give you a brief idea of some of the results, right? Key results that we have been able to study. So here we can see that the landed cost of hydrogen for power sector in Singapore. So as you can see here, that if you import hydrogen as a liquid ammonia and use it directly for power generation, that turns out to be the cheapest option for about, let's say, $8.3 per kg. So here what we have assumed is that you have a green hydrogen coming from Australia, which is 5,000 kilometers, right? And the H2 price is $6 per kg in Australia, right? So we're going to now transport that, and there is grid electricity is being used at the export terminal, which is somewhere like $200 per megawatt hour. So here it gives you the relative cost of various options. So you can see that ammonia direct option is the cheapest. The next cheapest is ammonia, but then ammonia and methyl cyclohexane are very close to each other. Then you have the next cheapest liquid hydrogen, and then you have methanol. Now the thing here is that you have this distribution of various costs. So this one is, for example, production cost. So as you can see here, because the supply chain is, you have the lowest supply chain cost when you're talking about using liquid ammonium as directly. But as you can see here, the production cost is a significant component because we are dealing with various types of technologies. So production, but I think the point that we want to make here is this, that even though production costs are the major cause, the dominant cause, right? But the supply chain costs cannot be neglected. So we need to basically attack, because production costs need technological advancements and things like that. Supply chain costs involves optimization. So if we can address that, we can cut down the cost. Now here you can see that if I reduce the cost of electricity at the export terminal from 200 to 100, what happens is that your overall costs go down. But you can see here that now liquid hydrogen becomes economical compared to MCH, because to convert hydrogen to liquid, you need to have electricity, right? So there is an impact. So you can see the impact of electricity cost on the relative landed cost of hydrogen. A key question that Singapore, for example, wants to answer is the following, right? That if I want to get hydrogen, and several companies are working on it now in Singapore, and so if you allow green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and all kinds of carriers, what's the best way? And we find that if you were to consider a profile of from 2020 to 2050 with an increasing carbon tax, etc., linear carbon tax, okay, you find that this green option, which is locally produced blue hydrogen, seems to be the cheapest. But the next best option would be, for example, getting the hydrogen via ship, right? So pipeline via getting hydrogen via pipeline, seems to be the best option right now. And but this is assuming the blue hydrogen. So you got to remember that you have to be able to produce locally hydrogen, but you have to have CCSU facility. So that's the key point, right? Typically, when we think about renewable energy, you might think that, well, gray hydrogen or blue hydrogen is out because the CCSU is not easy to do. But I think what we are trying to say here is that this is not an option you can completely discard. So here you can see some effect of distance on the cost of relative landed cost of hydrogen. So as you can see here, again, ammonia seems to be the cheapest. As you can see, the delivering pipeline using a 70-bar hydrogen has the strongest impact of distance, right? So this cost increases drastically. So only if you're talking about short distances, pipeline is an option. So let's say roughly between up to less than 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers. This is an option to distribute or supply hydrogen. But otherwise, you have to consider LH2 carriers, whether it is liquid hydrogen or your liquid organic carriers. And as you can see here, these supply chains which are based on liquid don't get affected so much by the change in distance. If hydrogen price, obviously, as we already saw, has a lot of effect. And you can see that the slope of all of these costs is higher when we consider the impact of, as we increase the hydrogen price, the cost of hydrogen obviously increases uniformly for all of these supply chains. This gives you the proportion of production as cost as a percentage of landed cost. So as you can see here, as hydrogen price increases, the landed cost increases, but the percentage of that cost, which is production cost, is roughly between, let's say, 50 to 60%. So it is important to spend energy or R&D to produce hydrogen cheaply, no matter where you are producing. So cheaper hydrogen is obviously highly desirable. Here we have a graph which gives you the impact of carbon avoidance. And Lots of assumptions are involved in these things, right? So I think what you should be focusing on a rough trend, right, or rough conclusion. So for example, here we can see that MCH seems to have the lowest carbon avoidance, partly because hydrogen is used as a fuel source for decomposing MCH, and that decomposition is quite important. Okay. I think I would not take more than 5 minutes. I know 15 minutes a bit short, so I'm probably running over the time. But as you can see here, the MCH seems to have the lowest avoidance because it needs more fuel due to lower hydrogen density, and also needs more heat for dehydrogenation. But if you want to really have the highest avoidance, then obviously pipeline seems to be the best. But as we said, right, depending on the distance, its cost effectiveness, it decreases. Here you can see that if you are considering blue hydrogen, then the avoidance decreases for drastically for 70 bar hydrogen pipeline, because you need to have the pumping cost. So that requires energy, and then that changes the cost drastically. Again, as you can see here, ammonia shipping seems to be quite good, but if you have blue hydrogen, the avoidance levels are roughly around 50%. So if you want to really go very high in avoidance, then you have to consider green hydrogen, right? LH2, liquid hydrogen, has the lowest avoidance because you need a lot of energy to liquefy hydrogen. Here we have supply chain energy penalties, right? Basically, so if I deliver, let's say, 1 kilojoules of hydrogen energy at the end point, how much energy I have to waste, I have to spend in the supply chain. So this is basically what supply chain energy penalty is. And as you can see here, pipelines have the highest energy penalty, and again, ammonia with direct use has the lowest energy penalty. And the energy penalty is very high for 700 bar hydrogen, which is needed for transport sector, because you need to transport hydrogen as a liquid, right? So to summarize, basically, renewable energy, right, and hydrogen supply chains are important to study for ASEAN because of the diversity of natural resources, right? You have some regions where you have renewable energy, some regions where you don't have any renewable energy, and then you have challenges of transport and logistics, etc. And your demand centers are different, and then your population is increasing, so your demand patterns are changing rapidly. Your carbon taxes are different as well. So all of these things make an interesting problem to analyze ASEAN as a whole, to see how things might evolve. Okay. As I said, all of the analysis and the results that we have given, things change rapidly, right? There is always R&D going on. Obviously, a lot of assumptions are involved underlying these results. So you have to be very careful when you try to look at all of these graphs. But the bottom line is that you don't want to make decisions based on whims and fancies, right? Sometimes people have impressions that liquid hydrogen is always costly or something like that, right? Because it requires a lot of energy. Another misconception probably, for example, people have is that, okay, you cannot use ammonia. You should not burn ammonia because ammonia has nitrogen, and then it's going to really lead to a lot of nitrogen dioxide emissions, right? And we have just published a study where we looked at the literature, and we found out that that assumption is not really correct, right? Of course, ammonia gives you higher emissions, but it is the hydrogen which gives you higher NOx emissions, okay? And then the other thing that we found out is that local or regional production of hydrogen with CCU is very important. It has the potential, and that is something that we cannot just discard off the table. And direct use of ammonia has some edge over others, and ammonia and MCH as hydrogen carriers with hydrogen as the final deliverable energy source are comparable and competitive over long distances. So hopefully this gives you some idea of, or a brief idea of some of the major conclusions. The work is going on. As I said, we are looking at now lots of different what if analyses for ASEAN as a whole. And so this work was largely focused on Singapore to answer the burning question that Singapore is facing, but our subsequent work now relates more on ASEAN as a whole with each country specific analysis. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have been able to get something out of this talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Karimi, very insightful your presentation, and I think we have learned something about hydrogen supply chain. Not only considering about economic, but also environmental aspect into consideration. So
let me stop sharing, right? Probably.
Yes, yes.
Okay, you're already stopped sharing.
Okay, so I think next I will let Dr. Jenny to give comments, thought, or any other perspective regarding Professor Karimi's presentation. So Dr. Jenny, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, all. First, I would like to say thank you so much for Professor Karimi, who has gave us a very good insight in the term of hydrogen supply chains. It's a great honor for me to attend this meeting and hear a very good study. Yeah, I think what Professor Karimi and teams have done is a very great. Yeah, we believe that hydrogen will play a significant role as a clean fuel in the future. However, we need to keep in mind that in the term of energy utilization, hydrogen cannot be said as an energy source, since we cannot directly obtain hydrogen from the nature. If we take a look back to the hydrogen production itself, we can see that the hydrogen production in any routes, let's say green hydrogen, gray hydrogen, or blue hydrogen, it requires a high amount of energy. Since the energy penalty from the hydrogen production is quite high, so it is very important to find the best way to transport and to store hydrogen if it is used far from where it's produced, I think. And here, what Professor Karimi and team has done regarding the hydrogen supply chain is very important. In my opinion, the interesting way to transport hydrogen is by occupying the liquid organic hydrogen carrier, like what Professor Karimi has mentioned. The organic liquid is much easier to be stored and to be transported as well. Yeah, it's very suitable if the hydrogen will be used for the further place. Some researchers suggest that we can use the cyclohexane or methyl cyclohexane, like mentioned in the paper. Yeah, unfortunately, as also mentioned in the paper very well by Professor Karimi, the energy penalty for these routes by occupying the cyclohexane and methyl cyclohexane routes, yeah, the energy penalty is quite high because it's occupy the hydrogenation and dehydrogenation process. So I think, yeah, it's not quite suitable. Another suggestion is by occupying the ammonia. Yeah, we already know ammonia, so it's a mature technology. Haber-Bosch has already make the process since maybe 1940 or something. It's a quite mature technology. It's quite easy to be transported as well. However, in the term of utilization, the utilization of ammonia for the energy production also give a high energy penalty, because when we utilize ammonia, we will produce the NOx, and it needs to be solved as well. And of course, it requires high amount of energy. So I think ammonia also have a drawback in this case. Another interesting way I found that we can maybe we can consider another organic compound, and it is formic acid. In the recent year, many researchers have developed the method how to utilize formic acid as a hydrogen carrier. Some researchers even found that using a certain catalyst, we can decompose the formic acid to produce hydrogen at a very low temperature, even at a room temperature, indicating that in the term of utilization, the energy penalty by using the formic acid routes is very low. But yeah, but there's still a challenge. How can we produce the formic acid efficiently? Yeah, so I think we can also consider as a formic acid as for transporting hydrogen. Once we can find good ways, if we can find a suitable routes to produce formic acid, I think it can be an interesting way to transport the hydrogen as well. I think that's my comment. Thank you, Pak Suwanto.
Thank you, Dr. Jenny. Dr. Karimi, if you have any further comments?
No, I think it's very good summary. Formic acid, obviously, as you said, right, is a candidate that lots of people are studying. Even at NUS, there is some study going on formic acid. So there are lots of other options, right? All of them have to be considered, right? I think yes. The only thing I want to say is that, as I was saying in the talk, right, NOx emissions are important, but what we have found is that if you take, for example, methane, right, and natural gas, you have certain level of NOx emissions. If you add ammonia to it, your NOx emissions increase. Okay, but if you add hydrogen to that methane, your NOx emissions even increase further. So it is not ammonia that causes NOx emissions; it is the hydrogen that causes more NOx emissions. So so I think we have to be a bit careful. You are right that NOx emissions increase definitely. Compared to natural gas, you have definitely more, but compared to hydrogen, you don't have so much. Okay, so that's something you have to remember. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Karimi and Dr. Jenny.
This is important because this is an issue which is important because as we transition from natural gas to hydrogen in Singapore, right? So people are considering mixture of hydrogen and methane, right? Or ammonia and methane. And so that becomes very important. So what is the impact of adding hydrogen to methane and then using that? So if you just use hydrogen purely, you got lots of NOx, okay? If you use natural gas, you got very little NOx, but ammonia is somewhere in between.
Okay, so okay, I think I'll start the Q&A and then responding to Professor Karimi about the transportation of hydrogen, because I think you mentioned also hydrogen transportation and storage is quite challenging to develop hydrogen technology. So in ASEAN, I think we have a gas network of pipelines that connected 6 countries around 2,600 kilometers now. And we have also the gasification terminals for LNG. And from your opinion, in the technical aspect, can gas pipelines also be used for transporting hydrogen for the early stage of hydrogen implementation in ASEAN? Also develop new transportation system or new pipeline system for hydrogen transportation.
Yeah, so I think these are very key technical issues, correct? Because we know that if you use metal pipes, there are concerns about embrittlement, because if you try to transport hydrogen in a very high concentration, your metal can become brittle, and then you really have pipeline failure. So that's a subject that people are looking at, trying to come up with various materials for pipeline transport and all that. For example, in Singapore, right, hydrogen town gas has a lot of hydrogen. 60% of town gas, for example, hydrogen, and it is distributed across Singapore. But this is being done in polyethylene PVC pipelines. So it's not metal pipelines, it's PVC pipelines. So that's, they are able to do that, right? So I think, this was a point which we discussed a lot. The pipeline network of ASEAN is very important, right? It's important not only from hydrogen transport, but also from CO2 transport, right? Natural gas transport. So because there's a combination of three things. Because so people are saying that, okay, instead of, for example, using natural gas to transport, right? If you were to get hydrogen from somewhere, you can use those pipelines to transport CO2. So for example, you can send CO2 from Singapore to Indonesia or Malaysia for sequestration. So the pipelines themselves have much use, but the technical question of whether we can use them for hydrogen in high concentration is a question that needs to be answered. Right? But I think for CO2, etc., they will be very good, very ideal. Right? So I hope I have answered the question. The other point about biomass gasification is very important, okay? Because the study that we are doing now, where we are looking at various options in various countries in ASEAN, what we find is that a hybrid method of producing hydrogen, which involves SMR with CCS and biomass gasification, turns out to be the best. Okay, so because of the natural resources available in Indonesia, Malaysia, and various other countries, that's a very, very good option. Okay, so I think, you know, we are still looking at it, analyzing the data and all that, but that seems to be quite good. I don't know whether I have answered all your questions, because it's not very easy for me to capture everything somehow.
I think you answered very well, talking about, you mentioned about biomass regasification, and I think Dr. Jenny, in 2020, you and your team published an article on Energy Journal, a novel system of biomass-based hydrogen production by combining steam, bio-oil reforming, and chemical looping process. And your team has proposed a novel system for hydrogen production from biomass. I think, can you elaborate more about this novel system? Where was this system kind of having high production efficiency, and how do you see the future of this system, for example, if compared to other in hydrogen production from solar or wind?
Yeah. So I think is Jenny going to answer?
Yeah. For Dr. Jenny.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Actually, what we have done is what we propose is actually a derivation of hydrogen production from biomass. Yeah, as we know that we can produce hydrogen from the solid fuel like biomass or coal by using gasification. But unlike coal, biomass contains high amount of volatile matter. So, and it may hinder the further processing of the gas, since the volatile matter will produce the tar in the end of the process. So then, to avoid this problem, we propose the routes to how if we separate the pyrolysis process and the gasification. From the pyrolysis process, we will produce the volatile matter, and then this volatile matter is then steam reformed to produce hydrogen, and then the char from the pyrolysis go through the gasification to the and also we consider to use the chemical looping gasification to increase the hydrogen production as well. And when we simulate this method, we can increase the hydrogen production quite significant, and also we can obtain the net electricity from the process. Yeah, I think that's what we propose. And the challenge of this process is that since we incorporate so many processes, pyrolysis, gasification, gas cleaning, and so on, this process can only be economical or economically feasible at quite large scale. And this is the problem, since if we use biomass as our feedstock, we cannot make it in the large scale, because there is a problem for gathering the biomass, preparing the biomass. Yeah, that's the, I think the main problem of all biomass-based processing is about the feedstock itself. If our technology is only if only feasible at very high amount or very high capacity, I think it's quite difficult to be applied. Yeah, that's the challenge we face so far.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, right. Professor Karimi, ASEAN Center for Energy last year has also done this report about hydrogen study in ASEAN. It's about economic prospects, development, and application. And based on our analysis, so that hydrogen application for power sector and transport is now still not economic. Financial term still becomes major challenge. Is still like the production is still very high cost. Do you have any kinds of idea, for example, incentive or tax reduction to promote the hydrogen technology in terms of financial?
Yeah, okay. So I mean, that's very obvious, correct? In the sense that we have gone through this with the story with biomass as well, right? Even for biomass, biodiesel, etc., incentives were given, right? But I think this is a decision that is very particular or specific to each government, correct? So for example, Singapore in general does not believe in such incentives, so they will not, so but there are obviously carbon tax is one way, but we realize that it's probably not that strong enough a measure, right? But who knows, after a few years the carbon tax may increase to a level where it becomes really significant. So but then there are other incentives that governments have ways to give, right? And lots of them. So at this point in time, I think the hope is that somebody is going to be able to produce very cheap renewable hydrogen. so everybody is sort of, for example, looking at Australia or maybe even Saudi Arabia, I think even Indonesia and Malaysia, to see how that can be done. If that can be done, then hopefully the problem will be solved. But as I said, it's not going to happen overnight. We will have to have some mix of these regulatory regimes and incentive regimes and R&D methods, etc., to find the best solution.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Carbon tax is, I think, one of tools to promote the renewable energy and natural low carbon. And ASEAN is also planning to make like ASEAN Hydrogen Asset Panel, like to support the ASEAN member state to design the best roadmap of hydrogen development in the region. So it's kind of discussion partner of phase. The panel will consist like 8 to 12 experts, and we are expecting providing the guidance and support for ASEAN member states. So Dr. Jenny, can have your views about this initiative to develop like ASEAN Hydrogen Asset Panel from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea. It's good initiative, I think, to how we can gather the expert from the Asian countries, because by collecting the expert from the various countries, we can a comprehensive roadmap for this hydrogen economy, and it's also increase the possibilities of the hydrogen economy. We have resource, we can produce hydrogen, but still quite high price. But then in other side, Singapore, which is far more emerging country, is afford to buy it. So by collecting all the Asian countries, I think the hydrogen economy market will become stronger, because we can gather which country is producer and which country is the consumer, and we can make a good implementation for the hydrogen economy. I think that's my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. Professor Karimi, if you have any other comments on that.
No, I think I agree with what what Dr. Jenny is saying. I don't think that there is any other. I think people have realized, right, that there has to be a role, right, that people like us can play, especially from a modeling perspective, right? Because often what happens is that you have very high level people meeting, and then decisions get based on one number. Somebody says, okay, cost is this much, so everybody says, okay, fine. But that cost is not universal, okay? If you just change the conditions, things are going to change. So it's better for us to have a tool-like heart where we can say, okay, right, you want to look at this situation, this is your number. Look at this situation, this is your number, and then make a decision based on informed. So informed decision is very important. Informed decision only comes when you do model and optimize, and so that's where I think the role of academics is important.
Yeah, I do agree that like academic institution is very important, and then if we have like a triple helix collaboration between academia and industry and also government, it like strong collaborations. I think even get like very what is to realize the technologies make it. I think yeah, we're like 6 minutes to 2 p.m. at 3 p.m. I think I would stop the Q&A session. Thank you, Dr. Karimi and Dr. Jenny, for your great discussion. Also, can you share the presentation? So before I conclude the session, allow me to convey some announcements regarding our activities and upcoming events. The first is if you have not joined ARNECC, we encourage you to join ARNECC by visiting our website and completing the registration. ARNECC is a researchers network on energy and climate change. This is a group of scholars, analysts, researchers, students, and other stakeholders organized around the theme of energy and climate studies in Southeast Asia. And next. We have ARNECC research database that we are collecting the articles in the field of climate and energy sector in ASEAN region. We have collected hundreds of articles, and we also welcome the researchers who want their article to be featured, for example, in this event, like ARNECC. Next. So apart from ARNECC research database, we also have ARNECC Paper Talks as today's event. It is a monthly event. We plan to hold the event by the end of this month. So we look forward to meeting you again in the 12th edition at the end of this month. So recently we published Energy Insight about COP26 and more seeding of energy climate actions, and a series of policy brief about pinch up for coal companies and for renewable energy in energy transition era. So learn more about the latest Expo publication by visiting Expo website or simply scan the QR code on the screen. Next slide, please. So we have also published journal paper entitled Moving Beyond the Indices, ASEAN Pathways to a Net Zero Emissions Power Sector in 2050. This article is to assess a power sector pathways to net zero emission by 2050 for ASEAN and analyze additional measures required beyond the business as usual and current policy trajectories to achieve net zero emissions. And in January this year, we have also had the first edition of ASEAN Energy Outlook Forum. And as part of the event, we have conducted the survey to obtain the public insight relating energy in 2021 and the outlook in 2022 and beyond. And we also published the report on the guidelines for developing indicators to take action on energy-related climate change mitigations policies given on energy-related climate change mitigation policies. So to give a holistic overview of the energy-related climate change in ASEAN member states. So you can visit the publication as before website. Next. So lastly, following the success of the first ASEAN International Conference on Energy and Environment, we'll hold the second IJ in September 2022 in conjunction with ASEAN Business Forum 2023 in Cambodia as a host country. So we will bring the theme of accelerating clean energy transition to enhance energy security and sustainability in ASEAN. So we encourage everyone to submit your abstract to the second ASEAN International Conference on Energy and Environment. And I think next. So yeah, we can conclude the event. Once again, thank you, Professor Karimi. Thank you, Dr. Jenny, for your times. And on behalf of ASEAN Center for Energy, thank you also for all the participants joining this event today. And see you next time. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you all and bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof Karimi.
Okay, thank you.
For great sharing. Thank you.